The rain fell heavy over Manhattan that October evening, turning the streets into mirrors of neon and regret. Inside the cathedral on Fifth Avenue, beneath arches that had witnessed 1,000 vows, Leah Bianchi stood in a dress that cost more than her father's yearly salary. The silk clung to her like a beautiful lie. The veil obscured her face, but not the truth she already knew. This marriage was a transaction, not a union. Enzo Ricci waited at the altar with the posture of a man who had never bent for anyone. His suit was Italian, tailored to perfection, black as his reputation. At 34, he commanded an empire that stretched from the docks of New Jersey to the penthouses of Miami. They called him the Silent King, not because he didn't speak, but because when he did, people disappeared. Leah was 26. She had grown up in a small apartment in Queens, where her mother taught piano and her father repaired watches. She knew the weight of an honest day's work. She understood the language of struggle. But she did not understand the world she was about to enter, a world where power was currency, and love was a weakness men like Enzo could not afford. The ceremony was quick, efficient. The priest's words floated through the incense-thick air like ghosts. Enzo slid the ring onto her finger without meeting her eyes. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, he did not kiss her. He simply turned and walked down the aisle, expecting her to follow. And she did, because that was what she had agreed to do. Outside, black cars waited in formation. Rain hammered the pavement. Photographers lurked in the shadows, their cameras hungry for scandal. But Enzo's men kept them at bay, silent and efficient as surgeons. Leah climbed into the limousine, her dress gathering around her like clouds. Enzo sat across from her, staring out the window as the city blurred past. He did not speak. He did not look at her. And in that silence, Leah felt the first real weight of what she had done. They drove to his penthouse in Tribeca, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Hudson River. The rain had followed them, streaking the windows, distorting the lights of the city below. Inside, the apartment was cold, modern, every surface polished to a cruel shine. There were no photographs, no warmth, only the architecture of a man who had learned to live alone. Leah stood in the center of the living room, still in her wedding dress, unsure of what came next. Enzo poured himself a glass of whiskey, the ice cracking like bones. He drank it in one swallow, then turned to face her for the first time since the altar. His eyes were dark, not cruel, but distant, as if he were looking at a piece of furniture he had purchased but not yet decided where to place. Then he spoke. His voice was low, measured, designed to carry only the weight it needed to. "You're not fit to be my wife." The words landed like stones in still water. Leah felt them sink into her chest, cold and heavy. She did not cry. She had promised herself she wouldn't. Not in front of him. Not ever. He continued, his tone unchanged, as if he were discussing the weather or the stock market. "You come from nothing. You know nothing about this life. You will live here. You will appear at my side when required. You will smile, nod, and say nothing that could embarrass me. In return, your family will be taken care of. Your father's debts will disappear. Your mother will never worry about money again. That is the arrangement. Nothing more." Leah stood perfectly still. Her hands, hidden in the folds of her dress, were shaking, but her face remained calm. She had learned long ago that silence was a kind of strength, that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman could do was not react. Enzo set down his glass and walked past her toward the bedroom. He paused at the door, his back to her. "The guest room is down the hall. You'll find everything you need there." Then he disappeared, closing the door behind him with a soft, final click. Leah stood alone in that cold, gleaming apartment, the rain hammering the windows, the city sprawling below her like a beautiful, indifferent beast. She had known this marriage would not be easy, but she had not expected this. She had not expected to feel so utterly erased. She walked to the window and pressed her hand against the glass. It was cold. Everything here was cold. Below, the streets of Manhattan stretched out in all directions, rivers of light and motion, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the girl in the white dress standing 40 stories above them, wondering if she had just made the greatest mistake of her life. But Leah Bianchi was not a woman who broke easily. Her grandmother had fled Naples with nothing but a suitcase and a prayer. Her mother had raised 2 children on a seamstress's salary. Leah had inherited their quiet resilience, the kind that didn't announce itself but simply endured. She would survive this. She would learn the rules of this world, and perhaps in time, she would find a way to carve out a small corner of it that belonged to her. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Enzo Ricci's coldness was not indifference. It was fear. Fear of what she represented. Fear of the one thing his empire could not protect him from. The possibility of caring for someone more than he cared for power. The weeks that followed were an education in invisibility. Leah learned to move through Enzo's world like a shadow, present but unnoticed, necessary but unacknowledged. She woke each morning in the guest room, its walls a sterile white, its furniture chosen for function rather than comfort. Enzo was always gone before dawn, his side of the penthouse silent as a tomb. She spent her days learning the geography of her new life. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a careful tongue. She taught Leah which rooms were off limits, which phones not to answer, which questions never to ask. The kitchen was restaurant grade but rarely used. The library held first editions Enzo had never read. The walk-in closet in the master bedroom contained suits worth more than cars, each one hung with military precision. Leah discovered that being Enzo Ricci's wife meant being a ghost in her own home. He came and went at irregular hours. Sometimes she heard him on the phone in his study, his voice low and sharp, speaking in rapid Italian she couldn't fully understand. Other times she glimpsed him leaving in the elevator, flanked by men in dark suits whose eyes swept every corner of every room before he entered. Mrs. Chen explained the reality with careful words over morning coffee. Enzo's business required discretion. His world operated in spaces between the legal and the illegal, in handshakes that meant more than contracts, in favors that could never be written down. He was not a mobster in the traditional sense. He had evolved beyond that. He was a fixer, a broker, a man who made problems disappear for people powerful enough to pay his price. His reputation was built on 3 pillars: ruthlessness, reliability, and absolute discretion. Men feared him not because he was violent, though he could be, but because he was efficient. A word from Enzo could shut down a development project, derail a political campaign, or make a competitor's financing evaporate overnight. He dealt in influence the way other men dealt in commodities, and Leah was part of that strategy. A respectable wife from a respectable family gave him legitimacy in circles that still valued tradition. She was his shield against questions about his character, his proof that beneath the rumors he was just a successful businessman who happened to keep his methods private. November arrived with bitter winds that rattled the penthouse windows. Leah established small routines to anchor herself. She walked in Battery Park in the mornings, bundled against the cold, watching the ferries cut through the gray water. She volunteered at a community center in Queens, teaching English to immigrants, work that felt real in a way nothing else in her new life did. She called her parents twice a week, lying smoothly about how happy she was, how kind Enzo was, how well she was adjusting. Her mother heard the truth anyway. Mothers always do. But she said nothing because she knew Leah's sacrifice had saved them. The creditors had stopped calling. The medical bills had been paid. Her father's small watch repair shop had been refinanced, given a chance to survive. Leah told herself this was enough, that she could live in this beautiful cage if it meant her family was safe. That love was a luxury, and she had never been raised to expect luxuries. But late at night, alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed below, she felt the weight of her isolation like water slowly filling a locked room. Then came the first public appearance, a charity gala at the Museum of Natural History, benefiting children's hospitals. Mrs. Chen informed her that Enzo required her presence. A dress had been selected, emerald silk that hugged her figure and fell to the floor in elegant folds. A stylist arrived to do her hair and makeup, transforming her into the kind of woman who belonged on Enzo's arm. When she emerged from the guest room that evening, Enzo was waiting in the living room, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked up, and for the first time since their wedding night, he truly looked at her. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He had chosen a wife for appearances, but he had not expected her to wear beauty with such natural grace. He said nothing, simply offered his arm. She took it, and they descended to the waiting car. The gala was exactly as she had imagined: crystal chandeliers and champagne, diamonds and designer gowns, conversations that danced around truth like boxers around a ring. Enzo moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, exchanging words that meant everything and nothing. Leah remained at his side, smiling politely, speaking only when spoken to. She met other wives, women who had also married into power, who wore their jewelry like armor and their smiles like masks. They welcomed her with air kisses and hollow compliments, their eyes assessing, calculating, wondering if she was strong enough to survive this world or if she would break like so many before her. One woman, the wife of a real estate developer, leaned in close during a lull in conversation. Her perfume was expensive, her whisper venomous. "He'll never love you, you know. Men like him don't have hearts. They have ambitions, and you're just another acquisition." Leah smiled, serene and untouchable. She had learned something in these weeks of silence, that power was not always loud, that sometimes the strongest response was no response at all. The evening wore on. Leah's feet ached in her heels. Her face hurt from smiling, but she never wavered. She stood beside Enzo, the picture of grace and poise, even as she felt herself disappearing a little more with each passing hour. As they drove home that night, Enzo broke the silence. "You did well tonight." 3 words. No warmth in them, but no cruelty either. Just acknowledgement. Leah turned to look at him. This man she had married. This stranger who controlled every aspect of her life. In the passing streetlights, his face was half in shadow, unreadable. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded, then returned his gaze to the window. And that was all. But it was something. A small recognition of her existence. A crack in the wall he had built between them. Leah turned to her own window, watching the city slide past. She was learning the rules of this world, learning to be what Enzo needed her to be. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the silk and the silence, she was still herself. Still the girl from Queens, who understood that survival was its own form of victory. What she didn't know was that Enzo too was learning that having Leah in his life was different than he had anticipated, that her quiet strength unsettled him in ways he couldn't name, that sometimes in unguarded moments he found himself thinking about the woman in the guest room, wondering what she was thinking, wondering if he had made a mistake by marrying someone so fundamentally good in a world built on compromise and corruption. But Enzo Ricci had spent his entire life building walls, and walls once built are not easily torn down. December came to Manhattan with a vengeance. Snow fell in thick, wet clumps, turning the city into a monochrome painting. The holiday season brought with it a different kind of pressure, a social calendar packed with obligations, each one another performance, another test of Leah's endurance. Enzo's behavior remained unchanged. He was polite but distant, present but unavailable. They existed in parallel orbits, crossing paths only when his schedule required her presence. Yet Leah noticed small things. The way he ensured her coffee was waiting in the morning, prepared exactly as she liked it. The way he had Mrs. Chen stock the kitchen with ingredients for the Italian dishes her mother used to make. The way he never raised his voice, never lost his temper, even when his phone rang at 3 in the morning with crises that would have broken other men. He was not cruel. He was simply absent. And somehow, that was harder to bear. Leah continued her volunteer work, finding solace in the community center's warm chaos. There she was not Mrs. Ricci, the Mafia boss's mysterious wife. She was simply Leah, a woman who helped elderly immigrants fill out citizenship applications, who taught children to read, who listened to stories of hardship that made her own troubles feel small. One afternoon, as she was leaving the center, she saw him, Enzo, sitting in his car across the street watching. Their eyes met through the falling snow. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. Then his driver pulled away and he was gone. That night, for the first time, Enzo joined her for dinner. Mrs. Chen had prepared osso buco, the veal falling off the bone, the risotto perfectly creamy. They ate in silence, the only sound the soft clink of silverware against china. Halfway through the meal, Enzo spoke. "You don't have to volunteer there." Leah looked up, surprised. "I want to. It's not safe, that neighborhood. I'm careful." He set down his fork, his jaw tight. "You're my wife. People know that now. You're a target. I won't live in fear," Leah said softly. "I won't stop being who I am because of who you are." Something flickered across Enzo's face. Anger perhaps, or something else. Something that looked almost like respect. He picked up his fork again, returning to his meal. "You'll have security. 2 men. They'll be discreet." It wasn't a request, but it also wasn't the cold dismissal she had come to expect. It was, in its way, a compromise. a small acknowledgement that she had a will of her own. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, and for the rest of the meal, the silence felt different. Less like a wall and more like a truce. The annual winter gala was the event of the season. Held at the Plaza Hotel, it drew the city's elite, old money and new money, legitimate businessmen, and those like Enzo who operated in the shadows. The ballroom glittered with 1,000 crystals, the orchestra played Vivaldi, and champagne flowed like water. Leah wore midnight blue this time, a gown that made her look like she had stepped out of an old Hollywood film. Her hair was swept up, her makeup subtle but flawless. When she descended the penthouse stairs, Enzo was waiting. And this time, when he looked at her, something in his expression shifted. A crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the reputation. "You look beautiful," he said. 2 words she had never expected to hear from him. 2 words that landed in her chest like a sudden warmth. "Thank you," she whispered. They arrived at the plaza to a storm of cameras and whispers. Enzo moved through the crowd with his usual confidence, Leah at his side. But tonight felt different. She could sense a tension in the air, a current of anticipation. Something was coming. She just didn't know what. The ballroom was breathtaking. Ice sculptures rose from the tables like frozen fountains. The ceiling had been draped with white silk, creating the illusion of clouds. Everywhere she looked, diamonds caught the light. Conversations buzzed with carefully guarded secrets. They were seated at a table near the front, surrounded by faces Leah had come to recognize. Developers, lawyers, a judge, a city councilman, all men who owed Enzo favors, or to whom Enzo owed favors. The economy of power made visible. Midway through dinner, he appeared. Marco Santoro, Enzo's rival, a man who had been trying to expand into Enzo's territory for years. He was older, in his 50s, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He approached their table with a glass of scotch in hand, flanked by 2 younger men in expensive suits. "Ricci," Marco said, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "Enjoying the evening?" Enzo looked up, his expression neutral. "Santoro." Marco's eyes slid to Leah, traveling over her with undisguised assessment. "And this must be the famous wife. I heard you married a charity case. Didn't believe it until now." The words hung in the air like smoke. Conversations around them died. Heads turned. Leah felt the weight of 100 eyes landing on her, waiting to see how she would react. She remained perfectly still. Her face betrayed nothing. She had learned this from her mother. How to absorb insults without flinching, how to deny your enemies the satisfaction of seeing you wounded. Marco continued, emboldened by the audience. "Tell me, Mrs. Ricci, how does it feel to be a trophy wife? To be purchased like a painting hung on the wall for decoration? Does he even know your name? Or does he just whistle when he needs you?" The crowd gasped. This was too much, even for Marco. He had crossed a line that was supposed to remain uncrossed, even in this ruthless world. Enzo stood. The movement was slow, controlled, but it silenced the entire ballroom. Every eye was now on him. Marco's smile faltered. For the first time, Leah saw fear flicker across the older man's face. Enzo buttoned his jacket with deliberate precision. Then he stepped away from the table. The crowd parted as he crossed the marble floor, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He stopped in front of Leah's chair. And then, before hundreds of witnesses, before the most powerful people in New York, before the cameras that would make this moment immortal, Enzo Ricci did something no one expected. He knelt. He took Leah's hand in both of his, raised it to his lips, and kissed it. Not quickly, not for show, but slowly, reverently, with a tenderness that shook the room. His eyes, when they met hers, held something she had never seen before. Vulnerability, recognition, perhaps even the beginning of love. When he stood, he turned to face Marco, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Her name is Leah, and she is worth more than every man in this room combined, including me. If you ever speak to her with anything less than the respect she deserves, you'll discover exactly why people fear my name." Marco stood frozen, his face drained of color. Enzo didn't wait for a response. He offered Leah his arm, and together they walked out of the ballroom, through the stunned crowd, into the cold December night. Outside, snow was falling again, soft and clean. The city sparkled around them. Enzo's driver pulled up, but Enzo waved him away. He turned to Leah, and for the first time since she had known him, She saw him clearly. Not the reputation, not the armor, just the man. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. For treating you like a transaction when you deserve to be treasured. For being too afraid to admit that marrying you was the only good decision I've ever made." Leah felt tears burning her eyes, but she smiled through them. "Then why did you say I wasn't fit to be your wife?" "Because I knew," Enzo said softly, "that you were too good for this world, that I would drag you down into darkness, that I would ruin everything pure about you. But I was wrong. You didn't become like me. I started becoming like you. You taught me that strength isn't always loud, that grace can be more powerful than fear, that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than what I've always been." He reached up, cupping her face in his hands. "I don't deserve you, Leah, but if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become a man who does." And there, on the steps of the Plaza Hotel, with snow falling around them like a blessing, Leah Bianchi kissed her husband for the first time. Not the man the world feared, but the man she had slowly, patiently, helped him remember he could be. The months that followed were a quiet revolution. Enzo did not change overnight. Men like him never do, but he changed. Gradually, deliberately, as if he were dismantling the fortress he had built around his heart, one stone at a time. He began coming home for dinner. Not every night, but most nights. They ate together in the kitchen, Mrs. Chen smiling secretly as she prepared meals, pleased to finally see the apartment filled with something other than silence. Enzo asked Leah about her day, about the people she helped at the community center, about her family. And he listened, really listened, not with the calculating attention of a businessman, but with the genuine curiosity of a man learning to see the world through someone else's eyes. Leah moved out of the guest room, not all at once, but gradually. First, her books migrated to the master bedroom shelves. Then her clothes found their way into the walk-in closet. Then one night, after a particularly long day, she fell asleep reading in his bed, and when she woke in the morning, he was beside her, watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning," she whispered back. And something that had been broken between them began to heal. Enzo started pulling back from the darker aspects of his business. It was gradual, strategic, but deliberate. He shifted toward legitimate investments, real estate, restaurants, tech startups. He turned down jobs that required methods he no longer wanted to employ. His associates noticed. Some respected the change. Others saw it as weakness. But Enzo had learned something. Power meant nothing if you lost yourself gaining it. One evening in March, when the city was shaking off winter's grip and the first cherry blossoms were appearing in Central Park, Enzo took Leah to a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy. Not the kind of place where deals were made, but the kind of place where families gathered, where the owner knew every customer's name, where the pasta was made by hand each morning. They sat in a corner booth, sharing a bottle of Chianti, and Enzo told her things he had never told anyone. About growing up in Newark, the son of immigrants who worked themselves to exhaustion trying to make it in America. About watching his father die at 53 from a heart attack in a factory that didn't care enough to call an ambulance for 20 minutes. About the anger that had driven him to build an empire, the need to prove he would never be powerless again. "But power doesn't protect you from loneliness," he said, staring into his wine glass. "I built this entire life, and it was empty. Until you." Leah reached across the table, taking his hand. "You're not alone anymore." "No," he agreed, meeting her eyes. "I'm not." That night they walked home through the city, hand in hand, just two people in love, invisible among millions. April brought rain and renewal. Leah's parents came to visit, nervous and uncertain, but Enzo welcomed them with a warmth that surprised everyone. He showed Leah's father his collection of vintage watches, listening with genuine interest as the old man explained the mechanics of a 1940s Omega. He asked Leah's mother about her piano teaching, then surprised her by revealing he had played as a child, before life had demanded harder skills. Over dinner, Leah watched her parents relax, saw them recognize that their daughter was genuinely happy, that the sacrifice had led not to suffering but to unexpected joy. Her father, who had worried every day since the wedding, finally smiled. Her mother cried, but they were good tears. After they left, Enzo held Leah on the couch, the city lights twinkling through the windows. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For making an effort. For caring about the people I care about." They're my family now, too, Enzo said simply. And he meant it. In May, Enzo made a decision that shocked his entire organization. He established a legitimate foundation, the Bianchi Ricci Foundation for Community Development. It would fund education programs, small business loans, and community centers throughout New York, focusing on immigrant neighborhoods. Leah would run it. He would fund it. Together, they would build something that actually helped people instead of just accumulating power. His former associates thought he had gone soft. His rivals thought he was playing a long game. But the truth was simpler and more profound. He had learned that legacy wasn't about how much you controlled, but about what you left behind. One evening in June, as summer light painted the penthouse gold, Enzo found Leah on the balcony, overlooking the Hudson. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you remember our wedding night?" he asked quietly. "Every day," Leah admitted. "I was wrong," he said. "You were always fit to be my wife. I was the one who wasn't fit to be your husband. But you made me better. You saw something in me I didn't even know was there." Leah turned in his arms, looking up at him. "We made each other better. That's what love is supposed to do." He kissed her then, soft and slow, with all the tenderness he had learned from her, all the vulnerability he had finally allowed himself to feel. "I love you, Leah Bianchi Ricci," he whispered against her lips. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." "You already have," she whispered back. And perhaps that was the greatest surprise of all, that a marriage born from calculation could transform into genuine love, that a man built from stone could learn to bend, that a woman with every reason to hate could choose to heal instead, that grace, patience, and quiet strength could accomplish what no amount of power ever could. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights, millions of stories, millions of people searching for connection in a world that so often felt cold and indifferent. But up there, 40 stories above the streets, in a penthouse that had once felt like a prison, two people had found something rare and precious. They had found each other. Not the versions they had pretended to be, but the truth beneath. And in that truth, they had discovered something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. They had discovered home. The story of Leah and Enzo reminds us that transformation is possible, that people are not defined by their worst moments, but by their willingness to grow beyond them. That love is not just a feeling, but a choice we make every day, to see the best in someone, to believe in their capacity for change, to build something beautiful from even the most difficult beginnings. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. We share stories of hope, resilience, and the unexpected ways love finds us, even in the darkest places. Because everyone deserves to believe that change is possible, that redemption is real, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply remain human in a world that often asks us to be anything but. Thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, humility builds love and love rebuilds everything else. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the bedroom, casting soft golden light across the hardwood floors. Leah woke to the sound of laughter, bright, unrestrained, the kind that only children possess. She smiled before she even opened her eyes, recognizing the voices immediately. Isabella was 4 now, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's gentle spirit. Marco, just 18 months old, was already displaying the stubborn determination that ran through both sides of his family. The sound of their feet pattering down the hallway, followed by Enzo's deeper voice pretending to be a monster chasing them, filled the penthouse with a warmth that would have been unimaginable 5 years ago. Leah rose and wrapped herself in a silk robe, making her way toward the kitchen. The apartment had changed dramatically since those early cold days of her marriage. Photographs now lined the walls. Family vacations to Italy, holidays with her parents, candid moments of joy captured and displayed without shame. The sterile, museum-like quality had been replaced with the comfortable chaos of a home actually lived in. In the kitchen, she found the scene she had expected. Enzo at the stove, attempting to make pancakes while Isabella helped by adding chocolate chips with generous abandon. Marco sat in his high chair, smearing banana across his face with intense concentration. Mrs. Chen, who now came only twice a week and spent most of her time being treated more like family than staff, was brewing coffee and shaking her head with affectionate exasperation. "Good morning, beautiful," Enzo said, looking up with a smile that still, after all this time, made Leah's heart skip. He had aged well. A few silver threads appeared at his temples now, fine lines around his eyes that came from laughter rather than stress. He looked lighter somehow, as if he had finally set down a burden he had carried for decades. "Mama!" Isabella shrieked, running over with chocolate-covered hands. Leah scooped her up, not caring about the mess, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Good morning, my love. Are you helping Papa cook? We're making special pancakes with chocolate and love." "The best ingredients," Leah agreed, catching Enzo's eye over their daughter's head. The look that passed between them carried the weight of everything they had survived and built together. After breakfast, the pancakes slightly burned but devoured anyway. Enzo left for a meeting at the Foundation's new headquarters in Queens. The Bianchi Ricci Foundation had grown beyond anything they had initially imagined. What had started as a small community initiative now operated in 12 cities across the country, providing microloans, education programs, and support services to immigrant families. Leah served as executive director, while Enzo handled fundraising and strategic planning. His business had transformed completely. He had systematically divested from anything questionable, building a legitimate empire focused on urban development and social impact investing. There were still people who whispered about his past, who would never fully trust the transformation. But there were far more who had witnessed the change and respected it, not because he had simply walked away from his old life, but because he had used his resources and connections to actually help the communities he had once exploited. Later that morning, Leah took the children to the park. It was one of those perfect June days when Manhattan felt almost magical. The sky impossibly blue, the trees full and green, the city humming with energy. She pushed Marco in the swing while Isabella played with other children on the climbing structure, making friends with the easy grace of childhood. A woman sat down on the bench beside her. Leah recognized her immediately. Sophia Moretti, one of the wives from that first gala years ago. One of the women who had whispered that Enzo would never love her. "Leah," Sophia said, her voice warm. "Your children are beautiful." "Thank you," Leah replied, genuinely pleased to see her. Over the years, several of those women had become real friends, their initial judgment replaced by respect. "You know," Sophia continued, watching Isabella play, "when you first arrived, we all thought you wouldn't last 6 months. That world, our world, it destroys people, especially people as kind as you were." "I'm still kind," Leah said softly. "I just learned I could be kind and strong at the same time." Sophia nodded. "You didn't just survive. You transformed everything. Enzo is a different man. And watching that happen, it made some of us question our own marriages, our own compromises." She paused, then added, "My daughter starts volunteering at your foundation next month. She wants to make a difference, like you. That's your legacy, Leah. You showed us all that change is possible." After Sophia left, Leah sat for a long moment, Marco dozing in her arms, Isabella's laughter ringing across the playground. She thought about that terrified girl in the wedding dress, standing in a cold apartment, being told she wasn't fit to be anyone's wife. She thought about the woman she had become, not despite that moment but because of it, because she had refused to let cruelty define her, because she had chosen patience over anger, grace over resentment. That evening, after the children were asleep, Leah found Enzo in his study, but it wasn't the fortress it had once been. Now it held children's artwork on the walls, toys scattered in the corner, family photos on the desk. He was reviewing grant applications, making notes about which community projects to fund. "Come here," he said, setting down his pen and pulling her into his lap. She curled against him, breathing in his familiar scent, cedar and coffee and home. "Isabella asked me today if you were always happy," Leah said quietly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that happiness is something we build, not something we find. That her father and I built it together, brick by brick, day by day." Enzo was quiet for a moment, his hand running through her hair with gentle repetition. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me?" Leah pulled back to look at him, seeing the vulnerability that he had learned to show her, the softness that existed beneath the strength. "Never. Not for a single moment. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they brought us here." "I don't deserve you," he whispered. It was something he still said sometimes on quiet nights when the weight of his past pressed against him. "Yes, you do," Leah replied firmly, "because you chose to become deserving. That's what matters. Not who you were, but who you chose to be." He kissed her then, slow and deep, with all the love he had learned to express. And Leah thought about the miracle of transformation, how a marriage born from coldness had become the warmest thing in both their lives, how a man built from stone had learned to bend, how she had discovered that her quiet strength was not a weakness to be hidden, but a power that could reshape worlds. Later, standing together on the balcony under a canopy of stars, the city spreading out below them in all its chaotic beauty, Enzo spoke the truth they both understood. "You saved me," he said simply. "No," Leah corrected gently. "We saved each other. That's what love does." And in that moment, with the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars, with their children sleeping peacefully down the hall, with the life they had built surrounding them like a blessing, Leah Bianchi Ricci understood something profound, that every ending is just another beginning in disguise, that the girl who had once felt erased had instead been reborn, that the man who had once believed himself incapable of love had discovered he had been wrong about everything that mattered. They had found their way through darkness into light, and the light, it turned out, had been inside them all along, waiting, patient, ready to illuminate everything the moment they were brave enough to let it shine.